He was winning. His lawyer had crushed every argument. The judge was leaning his way. His pregnant wife sat across the courtroom, looking like she had already given up. He had spent 3 years hiding money in shell companies, faking his girlfriend's pregnancy, and building an escape plan so perfect that no one would ever find it. And then his wife stood up. She was shaking. She was 7 months pregnant. She had no money, no power, no fancy attorney, but she had one piece of paper, one single detail that did not match, a timestamp, a date that should not exist. And when the judge looked at that detail, everything changed. His face went white. His lawyer stopped talking, and the empire he had built on lies began to collapse, one truth at a time. This is the story of a woman who was told she did not understand business. She did not need to understand business. She understood timing, and timing told the truth. Lesson and value. Before we begin, here's what this story will give you. It is not just entertainment. It is proof that your voice matters, even when it shakes. It is a reminder that you do not need to be powerful to be right. You just need to be brave enough to notice what everyone else ignored. If you have ever been silenced, dismissed, or made to feel invisible, this story is for you. If that opening made you want to know what happens next, stay until the end, because the twists in this story will shock you. And if this channel has ever made you feel seen, heard, or a little less alone, bye-bye son, tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever noticed a detail that changed everything? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the next ones we tell. Now let us begin. The courtroom smelled like old wood and quiet authority. It was the kind of room where lives changed direction in a single afternoon, where futures were rewritten by people who had never lived them. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a flat, institutional glow that made even expensive suits look ordinary. But David Bennett's suit did not look ordinary. He sat at the defense table in a charcoal three-piece that had been tailored in Manhattan, his cufflinks catching the light every time he adjusted his sleeve. His posture was relaxed. His breathing was even. His expression carried the particular calm of a man who had already rehearsed this moment 100 times in his head and won every single version of it. Across from him sat his wife. Laura Bennett was 7 months pregnant. She wore a simple navy dress that she had borrowed from her best friend because nothing in her own closet fit anymore, and because most of her closet was still locked inside a house she was no longer allowed to enter. Her hands rested on the table in front of her, fingers laced together, knuckles white. She did not look up. She did not look at David. She did not look at anyone. To an outsider, she looked like someone who had already accepted the outcome and was simply waiting for the paperwork to make it official. Her attorney, Sophie Carter, sat beside her. Sophie was 29, 3 years out of law school, and this was the biggest case she had ever handled. She had taken it pro bono because Laura could not afford anyone else, and because something about Laura's quiet determination reminded Sophie of her own mother. But right now, sitting across from Mark Reynolds, one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in the state, Sophie felt the gap between determination and power, like a physical weight on her chest. Mark Reynolds stood when Judge Catherine Owens entered. Everyone stood. The judge was 58, silver-haired, known for efficiency rather than sentiment. Years on the bench had taught her how to spot the cases that were already decided by numbers and statutes alone. She settled into her chair, opened the file, scanned it briefly, and looked up. "Let us proceed," she said. Mark Reynolds rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket in a single practiced motion. "Your Honor, The facts in this case are straightforward. My client, David Bennett, is the sole primary earner. He built Bennett Development from the ground up. The assets in question, including real estate holdings, investment accounts, and business equity, were acquired entirely through his income and his decisions. There is no evidence of misconduct, no hidden income, no violation of fiduciary duty. Mrs. Bennett's contributions, while perhaps well-intentioned, do not rise to the level of equitable claim. We respectfully ask the court to rule accordingly. He sat down, clean, efficient, devastating. Judge Owens made a note, then turned to Sophie, counsel for the petitioner. Sophie stood. Her voice was steady, but Laura could hear the effort behind it. Your Honor, Mrs. Bennett contributed to this marriage in ways that are not reflected on a balance sheet. She managed internal systems for her husband's company for 6 years without compensation. She organized records, maintained databases, and supported the operational infrastructure that allowed Mr. Bennett to build his business. She also sacrificed her own career to do so. Mark interrupted. Objection. Vague and unquantifiable. Sustained, Judge Owens said. Sophie pressed on. Furthermore, Mrs. Bennett is 7 months pregnant and was removed from the marital home without notice. Her access to joint accounts was revoked. Her health insurance was canceled during her pregnancy. Mark stood again. Your Honor, my client adjusted household arrangements in response to the divorce filing. These were protective measures, not punitive ones. Judge Owens raised a hand. I have reviewed the preliminary filings. She paused. Based on what I see so far, the financial evidence does substantially favor the respondent. David exhaled slowly through his nose. There it was, the confirmation he had been waiting for. He did not smile because he did not need to. The math had always been on his side. He had made sure of that years ago. Laura felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The slow compression of being reduced to a footnote in her own life story. She had spent 10 years building something alongside this man, 10 years of organizing, supporting, adapting, shrinking herself to fit the spaces he left for her. And now, in this room, all of that was being measured in dollars and dismissed. Judge Owens continued. Before I move toward a preliminary ruling, does either party have anything further to add? Mark leaned toward David and whispered, We are done. Just let it happen. Sophie looked at Laura, her expression apologetic. There was nothing more she could argue. The room waited. Then Laura looked up. She looked up at the judge, and for the first time that morning, her eyes were not lowered. They were not defeated. They were not empty. They were clear. Your Honor, she said quietly, may I speak? Judge Owens tilted her head slightly. You may. David frowned, not concerned, irritated, the way you frown at a delay, not a threat. Laura's voice was barely above speaking volume, but every word was precise. I was not involved in financial decisions during my marriage. I was told repeatedly that I would not understand them, but I was responsible for organizing records, filing authorizations, maintaining digital systems. I did this for 6 years. She paused. And there is one detail I noticed that has not been addressed. Mark stood quickly. Your Honor, discovery is closed. Any new evidence at this stage is procedurally inappropriate, Judge. Owens held up a hand without looking at him. Sit down, Mr. Reynolds. She turned to Laura. What detail, Mrs. Bennett? Laura reached into the bag beside her chair and pulled out a single folder. Thin, unimpressive. She placed it on the table. This is a system authorization log from my husband's company. I had access to these records as part of my administrative work. It shows a financial authorization signed by my husband 2 days after he swore under oath that all asset disclosures were complete. The room shifted. David's jaw tightened. He turned to Mark. What is she talking about? Mark did not answer immediately. Judge Owens extended her hand. Let me see it. The clerk carried the single sheet of paper to the bench. The judge read it. Her expression did not change. That was what unsettled David the most. She was not reacting. She was processing. Mr. Bennett, she said, were any financial authorizations executed after your sworn disclosure? David opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Those would be routine administrative processes, automated workflows. Were they automated or were they authorized? The judge asked. David swallowed. Authorized. The word landed heavier than it should have. Judge Owens set the paper down carefully. I am placing a temporary hold on any ruling in this matter. This court requires further examination before proceeding. David felt something crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Like a hairline fracture in glass that you only notice when the light hits it wrong. Laura sat back down, slowly. Her hands trembled beneath the table where no one could see. She had not planned to speak today. She had come expecting to lose. But when she heard David describe their marriage as clean and simple, something inside her refused to stay quiet. She did not know yet that this single detail, this one piece of paper with a time stamp that did not match, would unravel everything. She did not know that the man who walked into this courtroom, believing he had already won, was about to learn what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried. All she knew was that she had spoken, and for the first time, in a very long time, someone had listened. 6 months before that courtroom, Laura Bennett stood in the hallway of the home she had lived in for 8 years, holding a receipt she had found in the inside pocket of her husband's blazer while sorting his dry cleaning. The receipt was from the Langham Hotel. A suite, champagne, chocolate-covered strawberries, a late checkout. The date was October 14th. October 14th was the night David told her he had a board meeting that would run late and she should not wait up. Laura stood very still for a long time. She turned the receipt over in her hands as if there might be an explanation printed on the back. There was not. She placed it on the kitchen counter and made dinner. When David came home that evening, she set the receipt beside his plate without saying a word. David picked it up, looked at it, looked at her. He did not deny it. He did not apologize. He did not raise his voice. Instead, he set it down, straightened his collar, and said, "You should be grateful for the life I gave you, Laura. Do not make this ugly." Laura did not cry. She went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed until her breathing steadied. Then she called Rachel Torres. Rachel had been Laura's best friend since their freshman year at the University of Michigan. She was a nurse at Mercy General, a single mother of 2, and the kind of person who said exactly what she thought in the exact moment she thought it. When Laura told her about the receipt, Rachel was quiet for 3 full seconds. That was the longest Rachel had ever been quiet. Then she said, "I would key his car, but that is a felony, so let us get you a lawyer instead." Laura did not laugh, not yet, but something about Rachel's voice made her feel less alone. Over the following days, the picture became clearer and worse. Laura discovered the other woman's identity, not through detective work, not through snooping through David's phone, but because the other woman introduced herself. Her name was Megan Hale. She was 29, blonde, immaculately put together, and she served as the vice president of marketing at Bennett Development. Laura had met her twice at company events. Both times, Megan had smiled at her warmly and complimented her dress. Megan sent Laura a direct message through social media. The message was 3 sentences long. "He chose me. I think you already know that. The kind thing would be to let him go." Laura read the message 4 times. Then she showed it to Rachel, who read it once and said, "The kind thing, the kind thing." This woman is sleeping with your husband while you are carrying his child, and she is giving you advice on kindness. I need to sit down. Laura began to understand something she had been avoiding for years. David had not changed. He had simply stopped pretending. The charm, the control, the way he made every decision feel inevitable. These were not qualities, they were strategies. And she had been living inside his strategy for a decade without recognizing the walls. If you are reading this and something about that sentence feels familiar, if you have ever looked around your own life and realized the walls were not yours, that the shape of your days was designed by someone else, then you understand what Laura felt in that moment. Not anger, not yet, just the slow, sickening clarity of seeing the truth for the first time. Laura filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, David had frozen their joint bank accounts. By Wednesday, her health insurance was canceled. On Thursday, she drove home from a prenatal appointment to find her suitcase on the front porch. The locks changed, and a note from David's attorney stating that the home was held solely in David's name and she was no longer authorized to enter. She stood on the porch of the house where she had arranged furniture, hosted holidays, planted a garden in the backyard, and built a life she thought was shared. She stood there with her suitcase and her purse and the ultrasound photo from that morning's appointment still in her hand. Then she called Rachel. Rachel arrived in 22 minutes. She loaded Laura's suitcase into her trunk, drove her to her own apartment, installed her in the guest bedroom, made her a cup of tea and said, "That man just kicked his pregnant wife out of her own home, and he thinks he is the victim." Okay. She paused. "We are going to need a very good lawyer or a very creative alibi." Despite everything, Laura almost smiled. Finding an attorney proved harder than Laura expected. David was well known in the legal community. Bennett Development had done business with half the firms in the city. 3 attorneys declined Laura's case outright, citing conflicts of interest. A 4th quoted a retainer she could not afford. Then Sophie Carter called her back. Sophie was young. She worked at a small firm that handled family law. She had read about Laura's situation through a mutual connection and wanted to help. "I am not going to lie to you," Sophie said during their first meeting. "I am not the most experienced attorney in this area, but I believe you, and I will work harder than anyone else." Laura looked at this young woman with her slightly oversized blazer and her earnest eyes, and she saw something she recognized. Someone trying to build something meaningful in a world that kept telling her she was not enough. They started working that same week. Sophie requested financial documents from David's attorneys. What came back was a wall of paper, hundreds of pages of corporate filings, investment statements, trust documents, and tax returns, all organized to be technically compliant and practically incomprehensible. Everything was in David's name. Everything was structured to demonstrate that Laura had no financial stake in anything. If you are going through a divorce right now, or if you think you might someday, here is something Laura wished she had known years earlier. Document everything from day one. Do not wait until you are sitting in a courtroom wishing you had proof. Keep copies of bank statements. Screenshot account balances. Save emails. Write down conversations with dates and times. The truth has an expiration date if you do not preserve it. Laura did not have those records. What she had was something smaller, but ultimately more powerful. She had her memory of the systems she had built, the files she had organized, the timestamps she had entered into databases without understanding what they meant. She did not know it yet, but buried in those memories was the single detail that would change everything. David, meanwhile, was not worried. He told Megan the divorce would be quick and clean. He told his mother, Gloria Bennett, that Laura would take a settlement and disappear. He told his attorney, Mark Reynolds, that the case was a formality. He believed all of these things because he had always believed that control was the same as truth. He had controlled the money. He had controlled the narrative. He had controlled Laura for 10 years. What he had not controlled was a timestamp on a system log, and he had not controlled the quiet, persistent memory of a woman he had dismissed as too simple to fight back. The courtroom reconvened on a gray Thursday morning. Rain streaked the tall windows, and the fluorescent lights buzzed with the particular drone that made everything feel slightly unreal. Laura sat in the same spot as before. Same borrowed dress, same folded hands, but something had shifted in her posture. It was subtle, barely noticeable, like the difference between someone waiting for a sentence and someone waiting for a chance to speak. David noticed. He did not like it. The hearing began with procedural matters. Judge Owens reviewed motions, addressed scheduling, and confirmed that the temporary hold on ruling remained in effect pending further examination of the system log Laura had presented. Mark Reynolds objected to the delay 3 separate times. Each time, the judge overruled him with decreasing patience. Then Mark shifted tactics. "Your Honor," he said, standing with the measured confidence of a man who always had a second card to play. "Before we proceed with any further examination, my client wishes to update the court on a relevant change in his personal circumstances." Judge Owens raised an eyebrow. "Relevant how?" Mark adjusted his cuffs. "My client's partner, Megan Hale, is expecting a child. She is approximately 4 months along. Given that Mr. Bennett now has responsibilities to an expanding family, we request that the court consider the full scope of his obligations when evaluating any financial division." The words landed in the room like stones dropped into still water. Laura's hands went cold. She turned slightly toward Sophie, who was already looking at her with wide eyes. Sophie had not known. Laura had not known. No one on their side had known. Laura felt something disconnect inside her chest, like a cable snapping under tension. She was 7 months pregnant, sitting in a courtroom, fighting for basic fairness, and she had just learned that her husband's mistress was carrying his second child. He had been building a replacement family while she was still living in the original one. David did not look at her. He looked straight ahead, his expression neutral, as if the announcement were no different from updating a mailing address. Mark continued, "This development underscores the need for a practical, forward-looking resolution. My client is prepared to be generous, but the court must recognize that his resources now support multiple dependents." Sophie stood, her voice tight. "Your Honor, this is clearly a strategic disclosure designed to pressure my client." "The timing is suspect," Mark smiled. "The timing is biology, counsel. We do not control that." Judge Owens held up a hand. "I will note the disclosure for the record. It does not change the pending review." She looked at David. "Mr. Bennett, congratulations. Now let us continue with the matter at hand." But the damage was done. Laura sat frozen, processing the mathematics of betrayal. David had not just cheated. He had not just lied. He had planned. He had built something new with Megan, something designed to make Laura obsolete. And now he was using it as leverage. During the recess, Laura went to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and pressed her forehead against the cool metal door. She did not cry. She was past crying. She was in the place beyond tears where everything becomes very still and very clear, like the surface of water after a storm passes. She put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked. Once, twice. Laura whispered, "I am still here." When the hearing resumed, things got worse. Mark Reynolds presented what he called a comprehensive character assessment. It was a 40-page document outlining Laura's role in the marriage, her lack of independent income, her emotional dependency, and her failure to maintain any career outside of the home. It painted her as someone who had contributed nothing of measurable value. He read selected passages aloud. Mrs. Bennett has no professional credentials, no employment history outside of informal assistance to her husband's company, and no demonstrated capacity for independent financial management. Her claims of contribution rest on subjective interpretations of domestic support that cannot be quantified. Each sentence was a paper cut, small, precise, designed to accumulate. Sophie objected repeatedly, but the objections felt like throwing pebbles at a tank. The document was technically within legal bounds. It was cruel, but it was permissible. Laura listened to her own life being described as if it were empty. 10 years of waking up early to organize David's calendar, 10 years of managing his office systems, 10 years of remembering birthdays for his clients, coordinating events, handling the details he called small but never managed to handle himself. All of it reduced to the phrase, informal assistance. When Mark finished, Judge Owens turned to Sophie. Do you wish to respond? Sophie stood. Your Honor, my client managed internal filing systems, authorization databases, and operational records for Bennett Development for 6 years. She did this without title, without compensation, and without recognition. The fact that this work is difficult to quantify does not mean it did not exist. Mark replied without standing. If it is difficult to quantify, it is difficult to compensate. That is not cruelty. That is arithmetic. Judge Owens made a note. The court will consider both positions. After the session ended, Laura walked out of the courthouse into the rain. She stood on the steps and let the water hit her face. She did not move. She did not open her umbrella. Sophie caught up with her. Laura, I know today was hard, but the system log is still in play. The judge has not forgotten. Laura nodded slowly. Then she said something Sophie would remember for a long time. He did not just leave me, Sophie. He erased me. And now he is presenting the eraser as evidence. That night, at Rachel's kitchen table, Laura sat with a cup of tea. She did not drink and stared at the wall. Rachel sat across from her. She had already heard the full summary. She had already cycled through 4 different emotions. Now she was on the 5th. Strategic fury. Okay, Rachel said, setting both palms flat on the table. So, let me understand. He parades his pregnant girlfriend into court. He presents a document calling you a nobody. His lawyer makes jokes about biology. And the judge just lets it happen? Laura said quietly. The judge is being fair. She is following procedure. Rachel stared at her. Fair. Laura, that man kicked you out of your house, canceled your insurance while you are carrying his child, and is now using another woman's pregnancy as a weapon. If that is fair, I want a new dictionary. Laura almost smiled. Almost. Rachel saw it and leaned forward. There she is. Now listen to me. You built that man's systems. You filed his records. You know where things are. So we are going to find what he is hiding, and we are going to let that judge see it. Laura looked at her. What if there is nothing to find? Rachel shook her head. Laura, when a man spends that much energy looking clean, it is because something underneath is filthy. Trust me, I work in a hospital. I know what people hide. Laura reached for the old backup drive she had brought from the house before David changed the locks. Rachel had reminded her to grab it, and Laura had almost left it behind, thinking it was just old files, just routine records she had maintained during her years managing David's office systems. She plugged it in. The files loaded slowly, hundreds of them, authorizations, timestamps, system entries. Most of it was meaningless to her. She had entered this data for years without understanding the financial implications. She was the organizer, not the decision-maker. David had made that distinction very clear, but as she scrolled, she began to notice something. Dates. specific dates that she recognized, dates that corresponded to legal filings, dates that aligned with moments David had told the court his disclosures were complete, and authorizations that appeared after those dates. Not one, several. Laura stared at the screen. She did not fully understand what she was seeing, but she understood the pattern. She understood timing. She had spent 6 years managing schedules, tracking deadlines, making sure everything happened in the right order. Timing was the one language she spoke fluently. She pointed at the screen. Rachel, look at this. Rachel leaned in. She was a nurse, not a financial analyst, but she could read a calendar. These are all after his court dates, she said slowly. Laura nodded. Girl, Rachel said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He was moving money every time he swore he was done moving money. Laura's heart pounded. I need to show this to Sophie. Rachel grinned. Yes, you do. But first, screenshot everything, and then email it to yourself, to me, and to your mother. If he can change locks, he can delete files. Laura did exactly that. Then she sat in the quiet of Rachel's kitchen and let herself feel something she had not felt in months. Not hope exactly, something smaller and more stubborn. The feeling of someone who has been told she does not matter, deciding that she does. Sophie Carter did not sleep the night Laura sent her the files. She sat at her desk until 3 in the morning, cross-referencing the time-stamps from the backup drive against the sworn disclosures David had filed with the court. The pattern was there, unmistakable. Every time David told the court he had fully disclosed his assets, another authorization appeared in the system within days, sometimes hours. Sophie knew what this meant. She also knew how Mark Reynolds would respond. He would minimize. He would reframe. He would call it coincidence, administrative routine, automated processing. And she needed to be ready. The next hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Sophie filed a motion to present supplemental evidence. Mark objected. Judge Owens overruled him with a look that suggested she was running out of patience for objections. Your Honor, Sophie began, my client has identified a pattern of financial authorizations that correspond directly with dates of sworn disclosures. These are not isolated entries. They represent a consistent sequence of activity that occurred after each point at which Mr. Bennett told this court his financial picture was complete. She handed the compiled evidence to the clerk. Judge Owens reviewed it. The courtroom was quiet. David sat very still. His face betrayed nothing, but Laura noticed his right hand, the one resting on the table. His fingers were pressing into the wood. Judge Owens looked up. Mr. Bennett, these authorizations bear your digital signature. Can you explain the timing? David leaned toward Mark, who whispered something. David then spoke. Your Honor, Bennett Development operates in a high-volume environment. Authorizations occur regularly. The timing is coincidental. Judge Owens did not blink. You are telling me that on 7 separate occasions, financial authorizations coincidentally occurred within 48 hours of your sworn disclosures. David's voice tightened. Business does not stop for legal proceedings. No, the judge agreed, but disclosure obligations do not stop for business either. Laura felt something bloom in her chest. A warm, fragile thing, hope. She dared to glance at Sophie, who gave her the smallest nod. Then Mark Reynolds played his card. Your Honor, he said, standing with the deliberate calm of someone who had prepared for this exact moment. Regarding the account my colleague seems most concerned with, I direct the court's attention to page 47 of the initial disclosure filing. Subsection C, footnote 12. Sophie frowned. Judge Owens shuffled through the enormous stack of paper. After a moment, she found it. She read silently. Mark continued. The account in question was disclosed in full compliance with procedural requirements. It was listed. It was reported. The fact that opposing counsel did not read the full filing does not constitute concealment on my client's part. The heir left the room. Sophie scrambled through her own copy. Page 47, subsection C, footnote 12. There it was, a single line, buried in 200 pages of dense legal text, referencing the account in language so technical it was nearly incomprehensible. But it was there. Technically disclosed, technically legal, technically devastating. Judge Owens looked at Sophie. Counsel, were you aware of this footnote? Sophie's face went red. Aye, Your Honor. The volume of documents submitted by opposing counsel was extensive. We may have overlooked this. Mark smiled. Oversight is not the court's burden to correct. Judge Owens leaned back. The disclosure appears to have been made within required parameters. She paused. However, I remain concerned about the broader pattern. The hold remains in effect. It was something. But it felt like nothing. Laura watched her one weapon, the one piece of evidence she had thought could change everything, get neutralized by a footnote. David had hidden it in plain sight, buried so deep that finding it felt like failure. After the hearing, David passed Laura in the hallway. He stopped, adjusted his cufflinks, and said quietly, "You should have taken the settlement, Laura. This is embarrassing for both of us." Laura looked at him. For both of us? David shrugged. You are making yourself look desperate. But the judge sees it. Everyone sees it. Laura felt the words land like punches, but she held her ground. Then she said, maybe, or maybe the judge sees something else. David walked away without responding, but Laura noticed his stride was slightly faster than usual, slightly less composed. That night, Laura sat on Rachel's couch, staring at the ceiling. She called Sophie, who answered on the first ring. It is not over, Sophie said. The footnote covers one account, but the pattern covers 7 authorizations. He explained one. He has not explained the other 6. Laura closed her eyes, but it felt like it was over in there. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I know, but the judge kept the hold. That means she is not done looking, and neither are we. Rachel, who had been listening from the kitchen, walked in carrying 2 bowls of ice cream. She handed one to Laura. Bad days get ice cream. That is the rule. And also, I need to tell you something. Laura looked at her. What? Rachel sat down. I was at work today, and I overheard something. Now, I am not supposed to repeat things I hear at the hospital, and I am absolutely not going to tell you that David's girlfriend, Megan Hale, visited a different OB/GYN last week. I am also not going to tell you that the timeline of her pregnancy does not match what David told the court. Laura stared at her. What are you saying? I am saying nothing, Rachel said, eating a spoonful of ice cream. Absolutely nothing. But if I were saying something, it would be that Miss Replacement's math does not add up. Laura's heart rate spiked. She looked at Sophie's number on her phone. Then she looked at Rachel. Rachel shrugged. I am just a nurse who eats ice cream and notices things. Kind of like you are just an office manager who notices timestamps. Something sparked in Laura's chest. Not hope this time. Something harder. Resolve. The stress arrived not as a moment, but as an accumulation. It came in the form of sleepless nights and skipped meals, and the constant low hum of anxiety that never quite subsided, in the way Laura's body began to rebel against the weight it was carrying, both physical and otherwise. She woke one morning at Rachel's apartment with a tightness in her abdomen that felt different from anything she had experienced before. Sharp, rhythmic, wrong. Rachel took one look at her and said, We are going to the hospital right now. Laura protested. I have a meeting with Sophie at 10. Rachel was already grabbing her keys. Sophie can wait. Your baby cannot. Let us go. At Mercy General, the doctors confirmed what Rachel had suspected. Premature contractions, stress-induced. The baby was stable, but Laura needed bed rest immediately. Extended bed rest, no exceptions. Laura lay in the hospital bed, monitors beeping softly, her daughter's heartbeat filling the room with a steady rhythm that sounded like reassurance itself. She stared at the ceiling and tried to calculate how she was supposed to fight a legal battle from a hospital bed. Rachel sat beside her, reading a magazine she was not actually reading. Laura, she said without looking up, you need to let people help you. I do not have people, Laura said quietly. I have you and Sophie. Rachel put the magazine down. That is 2 more people than that man deserves, and 2 more than he expected you to have. The next morning, David visited. He arrived during visiting hours, which Laura suspected was deliberate. Witnesses. He stood at the foot of her bed in a dark blue suit, his expression arranged into something that resembled concern but did not quite reach his eyes. Megan waited in the car downstairs. David looked at the monitors, the IV, the hospital gown. Then he said, "This does not have to be this hard, Laura." Laura watched him. She did not respond. He reached into his jacket and produced an envelope. Sign the settlement. Take what I am offering. It is more than fair, and honestly, it is more than you deserve. He placed the envelope on the bedside table. Your attorney can review it, but I think you will find it practical. Laura looked at the envelope, then she looked at him. I built your filing systems, David. I organized your life for 10 years. I scheduled your meetings, managed your records, kept your world running, while you built yours. Do I deserve to be told what I deserve? David adjusted his cufflinks. The gesture that once looked like confidence now looked like a nervous habit. You are emotional right now. That is understandable. I am clear right now, Laura said. That is what scares you. David stared at her for a moment. Then he picked up the envelope and left without another word. 48 hours later, Laura received a legal filing that made the conversation at the hospital look like small talk. David had filed an emergency motion. The motion stated that Laura's hospitalization demonstrated physical and mental instability. It cited her stress levels, her bed rest requirement, and her inability to maintain normal daily activities as evidence that she was unfit to serve as primary caregiver. The motion requested temporary custody rights over their unborn child and asked the court to appoint a guardian ad litem to evaluate Laura's fitness as a mother. He was trying to take her baby before her baby was even born. Sophie called Laura immediately. Laura, I need you to listen to me carefully. This is a scare tactic. It is designed to pressure you into settling. The court does not grant custody of unborn children based on a hospitalization. Laura heard the words. She understood them intellectually, but her hands were shaking so hard that Rachel had to hold the phone for her. Rachel read the filing aloud in a voice that started controlled and ended furious. She then said something Laura would never forget. He wants to use your love for your child as a weapon against you. That tells you everything about who he is and nothing about who you are. If you are hearing this and you are in a situation where someone is using your children or your pregnancy or your health as leverage against you, please know this. You are not unstable because you are stressed. You are not unfit because you are struggling. You are a human being responding to an inhuman situation, and there are people who will stand with you. Laura did not sign the settlement. Instead, she called Sophie from her hospital bed and said 4 words. Find everything. All of it. Sophie worked around the clock. She pulled every file from the backup drive, cross-referenced every timestamp, mapped every authorization against every legal filing. The pattern that had been visible before now became overwhelming. This was not one account hidden in a footnote. This was a system. And then Rachel delivered the other piece of the puzzle. She came to the hospital one evening, closed the door to Laura's room, and sat down with an expression that was half excitement and half guilt. "I am going to tell you something," she said, "and you are going to pretend I did not tell you. And then you are going to tell Sophie." "What is it?" Laura asked. Rachel leaned forward. "Megan Hale's pregnancy timeline does not match. I cannot tell you exactly how I know this because of privacy regulations. But the dates David presented to the court are not consistent with what the actual medical records would show if someone were to subpoena them." Laura stared at her. "Are you saying she is not as far along as they claimed?" Rachel held up both hands. "I am saying that if your lawyer subpoenas those records, she might find something very interesting. That is all I am saying. Also, the cafeteria has really good pudding today. Do you want some?" Laura called Sophie. Sophie called the court. The subpoena was filed the next morning. The hearing that followed Laura's hospitalization was different. Judge Owens entered the courtroom with a thicker file and a sharper focus. The preliminary tone of efficiency had been replaced by something more deliberate. She was paying attention now, close attention. Sophie Carter stood with more confidence than she had shown in any previous session. "Your Honor," she began, "my client has been subjected to an emergency custody motion filed while she was hospitalized for pregnancy complications caused directly by the stress of these proceedings. We ask the court to dismiss this motion and to hear testimony from Mrs. Bennett's treating physician." Judge Owens nodded. "Proceed." Dr. Angela Morris, a calm, authoritative obstetrician, took the stand. She confirmed that Laura's hospitalization was caused by stress-related premature contractions, that the baby was healthy, that Laura was physically capable of caring for a child, and that in her professional opinion, the primary source of Laura's stress was external pressure from the divorce proceedings. When Mark Reynolds cross-examined, he asked a single question. "Doctor, would you say that someone under this level of stress is in the best position to make major life decisions?" Dr. Morris looked at him steadily. "I would say that someone who causes this level of stress in a pregnant woman should not be making decisions for her." The gallery stirred. Judge Owens suppressed something that might have been the ghost of a smile. The judge dismissed David's emergency custody motion in 4 sentences. "The court does not find evidence of maternal unfitness. Hospitalization due to stress is not a disqualifying condition. The motion is denied. Do not file another one like it." Laura closed her eyes. Relief poured through her like warm water. Sophie squeezed her hand under the table. But the day was not over. Sophie then presented the expanded timeline analysis. 7 separate authorizations, all bearing David's digital signature, all occurring within 48 hours of sworn disclosures. She presented them methodically, one by one, on a projected screen that made the pattern impossible to ignore. Judge Owens studied the screen for a long time. Then she turned to David. "Mr. Bennett, you previously explained one of these authorizations as coincidental. How do you explain 7? David looked at Mark, who stood quickly. "Your Honor, we maintain that these represent normal business operations." Judge Owens did not look at Mark. She looked at David. "I asked your client, Mr. Reynolds." David spoke carefully. "My company operates around the clock. Authorizations are a routine part of management." The judge leaned forward. "Then why do they cluster specifically around your court dates? Do your business needs coincidentally intensify every time you file a sworn statement?" David opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Judge Owens announced she was ordering a court-appointed financial examiner to conduct a full review of David's financial activity. She gave him 2 weeks to comply. Laura felt hope surge again. Real hope this time. The judge was not just listening, she was looking. And what she was looking at was damning. Then Mark Reynolds introduced Dr. Harold Finch. Dr. Finch was a psychiatrist. He had silver hair, an expensive tie, and a professional demeanor that radiated authority. Mark explained that Dr. Finch had conducted a behavioral assessment of Laura Bennett based on her social media activity, her hospital records, and behavioral patterns observed during proceedings. Sophie objected immediately. "Your Honor, this expert has never examined my client in person. This is not a legitimate evaluation," Mark replied. "Your Honor, Dr. Finch is a court-recognized expert in behavioral assessment. His methodology is peer-reviewed and widely accepted." Judge Owens frowned. She turned to Dr. Finch. "What are your conclusions, Doctor?" Dr. Finch opened a folder. "Based on my review, Mrs. Bennett exhibits patterns consistent with persecutory ideation and obsessive fixation. Her insistence on a conspiracy of hidden assets, despite limited evidence, suggests a distorted perception of reality." The words hit Laura like a physical blow. She sat perfectly still, but inside, everything was screaming. They were calling her crazy. They were using her determination against her. The thing she had always been told about herself, that she was too emotional, too sensitive, that she did not understand, was now being presented as medical evidence. Sophie stood. "Your Honor, this evaluation was conducted without direct examination. It violates basic ethical standards." Judge Owens hesitated. She clearly had reservations, but Mark had framed the evidence within legal parameters. "I will enter the assessment into record," the judge said, "but I am ordering an independent evaluation as well." She looked at Dr. Finch. "And Doctor, I will be reviewing your methodology with some interest." It was not a dismissal, not entirely, but the damage was done. The seed had been planted. The word delusional was now attached to Laura's name in an official court record. Outside the courtroom, Laura stood in the hallway, hands pressed against the wall, breathing in slow, controlled patterns. Rachel stood beside her. "They called me crazy," Laura said. "He hid millions of dollars, and they are calling me crazy for noticing." Rachel put her arm around Laura's shoulders. "You are not crazy. You are dangerous. And that is why they need you to be crazy. Because if you are sane, then everything you are saying is true. And the truth is, what scares them?" Laura looked at her. "What if the judge believes them?" Rachel shook her head. "That judge has not believed David Bennett since the moment you stood up and showed her that timestamp. She is doing her job, and your job is to keep standing it up." Laura nodded. But that night, alone in Rachel's guest bedroom, she lay awake and wondered how many women had been silenced, not by evidence, but by labels. How many times had the word emotional been used as a weapon? How many times had unstable been the diagnosis for someone who simply refused to stay quiet? She put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked. Hard. Laura whispered, "I know, me too." What happened next came in 3 waves, each one more devastating than the last, arriving so close together that Laura barely had time to recover from one before the next one hit. Day 1. Laura received a certified letter at Rachel's apartment. She opened it, expecting something from the court. Instead, it was an eviction notice. The letter informed her that the property at Rachel's address had been acquired by a new management company and that a review of current leases had identified compliance violations requiring all tenants to vacate within 30 days. The management company was called Summit Property Holdings. Laura showed the letter to Rachel, who stared at it for a long time. Then Rachel went to her computer and searched for Summit Property Holdings. The company had been incorporated 3 months ago. Its registered agent was a law firm Laura recognized. It was the same firm that handled corporate filings for Bennett Development. He bought the building, Rachel said, her voice flat with disbelief. He bought my entire building to kick you out. Laura sat down heavily. He is not trying to win the case. He is trying to make it impossible for me to exist. Rachel paced the kitchen. That man bought a whole building just to evict a pregnant woman. That is not strategy. That is pathology. They had 30 days. Laura had nowhere else to go. Rachel's sister lived out of state. Laura's parents had passed. Her support system consisted of Rachel and Sophie, and David was systematically attacking both. Laura moved what she could into Rachel's car. They would figure out the rest later. Right now, survival came in hours, not days. Day 2. Laura went to the grocery store. She needed to move, needed to do something normal, something that did not involve courts or attorneys or eviction notices. She walked through the produce section slowly, one hand on her belly, the other reaching for apples. She did not see Gloria Bennett until the woman was standing directly in front of her. Gloria was David's mother, 71 years old, immaculate, wearing pearls and an expression that could freeze water. She had never approved of Laura. She had told David on his wedding day that he could do better. She had told Laura at a family dinner that she was lovely, but perhaps not quite suited for the Bennett world. Now she stood in the produce aisle of a grocery store and said, loud enough for every nearby shopper to hear, well, if it is not the gold digger carrying a trap baby. Laura froze. Gloria continued, you know what you are doing, do you not? You are dragging my son through the mud because you cannot accept that he outgrew you. You contributed nothing to that marriage. Nothing. And now you want to be compensated for existing. Laura's throat closed. She could not speak. She could not move. She stood there, holding an apple, while a 71-year-old woman dismantled her in a grocery store. Someone behind them raised a phone and began recording. Gloria did not notice or did not care. My son gave you a life you never could have built on your own, and this is how you repay him, with accusations, with hysteria, with lawyers paid for by the goodness of strangers, because you cannot even afford your own. Laura finally found her voice. It came out thin and shaking. I contributed 10 years, Gloria. I built systems your son could not run without me. Gloria waved her hand dismissively. You filed papers. That is not building anything. That is being useful. And useful is not the same as valuable. Laura turned and walked away. She left the apple. She left the cart. She walked to the parking lot, got in Rachel's car, and drove home in silence. That night, the video appeared online. Someone had uploaded it with a caption that read, Mother-in-law destroys gold digger in grocery store. It received 40,000 views in 6 hours. The comments were split. Half called Laura a victim. Half called her exactly what Gloria had called her. Laura saw the video at 2 in the morning. Rachel found her sitting on the bathroom floor, phone in her hand, scrolling through comments. Rachel took the phone gently. You are not reading another word. Those people do not know you. I know you. Your baby knows you. That is enough. Laura nodded, but she did not sleep. Day 3. Sophia Carter called at 9 in the morning. Her voice was different, thinner, frightened. Laura, she said, David's legal team filed a complaint against me with the State Bar Association. Laura sat down slowly. What? They are alleging professional misconduct. They claim I submitted unverified and potentially fabricated evidence to the court. They are saying the system logs you provided may have been tampered with. If the complaint is sustained, I could be suspended. I could lose my license. Laura felt the floor tilt beneath her. Sophie, those logs are real. I did not alter anything. I know, Sophie said. Her voice cracked. I know that. But the process takes time, and in the meantime, this hangs over everything I do in that courtroom. They are trying to discredit me so that anything I present is questioned. Laura pressed her hand over her eyes. He is not just fighting me. He is fighting everyone who helps me. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Laura, I believe you. I have always believed you. But I need you to know what we are up against. That night, Laura sat alone in Rachel's kitchen. It was 2 in the morning. The apartment was quiet. Rachel was asleep. The city outside was dark. Laura looked at the table in front of her. No files, no phone, no laptop, just her hands, folded together, and the silence. She had no home. Her reputation was destroyed. Her lawyer was under attack. She was 8 months pregnant. And the man who had promised to love her was spending his wealth to dismantle every pillar of her life, one by one. She put her hand on her belly. The baby moved. Laura whispered, I am sorry. I am trying. Then she sat in the dark for a long time, breathing, thinking, remembering the systems she had built, the files she had organized, the patterns she had seen. She thought about every time David had told her she did not understand business, every time he had patted her on the shoulder and said, let me handle it. He had been right about one thing. She had not understood the finances, but she understood structure. She understood organization. She understood timing. And she understood, with a clarity that felt like iron, that the man who had told her she was not smart enough to fight was about to learn what happened when she stopped believing him. Sophie Carter did not lose her license. The bar complaint was reviewed on an expedited basis. Sophie submitted the provenance of the system logs, including the backup drive, the timestamps, the access records, showing Laura's legitimate administrative credentials. The review board found the evidence was authentic, properly obtained, and admissible. The complaint was dismissed in 11 days. Mark Reynolds did not mention it in court. He did not need to. The damage had been the point, but Sophie came back sharper, harder. She had been tested and she had survived, and there was something in her eyes now that had not been there before. She looked, Laura thought, like someone who had stopped being afraid. The court-appointed financial examiner, Robert Klein, completed his review on a Friday afternoon. He submitted his report to Judge Owens over the weekend. By Monday morning, both legal teams had copies. Sophie read it first. She called Laura at 7 a.m., her voice vibrating with controlled intensity. Laura, you need to come in. Laura arrived at Sophie's office an hour later, Rachel driving because Laura's hands were shaking too much. Sophie was standing behind her desk, the report open in front of her. She looked like someone who had just opened a door and found an entirely different room on the other side. It is not just the authorizations, Sophie said. It is everything. She walked Laura through the findings. Robert Klein had traced the authorization pattern backward, not just to the divorce filings, not just to the sworn disclosures. The pattern extended 3 years back. David had been systematically transferring marital assets into a network of shell companies, trusts, and offshore entities. He had created layers of corporate structures designed to make the money untraceable. The total amount identified so far was $4.2 million. Laura sat down. $4 million. Sophie nodded. And that is the preliminary number. Klein thinks there may be more, but there was something else, something that changed the shape of the entire story. Laura, Sophie said carefully. Megan Hale is not just David's girlfriend. She is listed as the CEO of 2 of these shell companies. Her name is on incorporation documents filed 18 months ago. That is 6 months before David claims their relationship began. Laura stared at her. She was part of it from the beginning. Sophie nodded. She was not the other woman. She was the business partner. The affair was the cover for a financial operation. Laura felt something shift inside her. Not anger, something colder and more precise. He planned this, she said. He planned all of it. The affair, the shell companies, the divorce. He was building an escape route while I was building his filing systems. Sophie took a breath. There is one more thing. The subpoena we filed on Megan's medical records came back. Laura looked at her. Sophie met her eyes. Megan Hale is not pregnant. She has never been pregnant during the period David claimed. The medical records show no pregnancy-related visits, no prenatal care, nothing. David fabricated the pregnancy claim to strengthen his custody motion and to make you look unstable by comparison. The room went completely silent. Laura sat with this information for a long time. She did not speak. She did not cry. She thought about standing in that courtroom, 7 months pregnant, learning that her husband's mistress was also expecting. She thought about the way that news had shattered her, the way it had made her feel replaceable, disposable, reduced to a biological function that someone younger and prettier was already performing. And none of it was real. He had manufactured a pregnancy to break her. He had invented a child to take hers. Rachel, who had been standing by the door, said quietly, "I am going to need a minute." She walked into the hallway, and Laura heard her punch the wall. When the court reconvened, Sophie presented the examiner's findings methodically. She laid out the shell companies, the offshore transfers, the 3-year timeline. She presented Megan Hale's role as corporate officer, and then she presented the medical records. The courtroom was so quiet that Laura could hear the air conditioning. Judge Owens read each document carefully. She took her time. She did not react visibly, but Laura noticed something she had not seen before. The judge's hands were steady, but her jaw was tight. She was angry. Not performatively angry, genuinely angry. Judge Owens looked at David. "Mr. Bennett, these findings indicate that your girlfriend, Miss Hale, has been serving as a corporate officer in entities specifically designed to conceal marital assets. They further indicate that the pregnancy you reported to this court was fabricated." David looked at Mark. Mark did not look back. David spoke, his voice strained. "Your Honor, I can explain." Judge Owens raised a hand. "You have had many opportunities to explain. At each one you chose concealment over candor." She turned to the gallery, where Megan Hale sat in a fitted red dress, her composure cracking like porcelain. "Ms. Hale, you are named in these findings as an officer in entities designed to defraud the court and conceal marital assets. I strongly suggest you retain your own counsel." Megan stood. She looked at David. He looked at her. For a moment, something passed between them. Then Megan picked up her purse and walked out of the courtroom. She did not look back. David watched her go. And in that moment, Laura saw something she had never seen on his face before: fear. Judge Owens did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The facts were speaking for themselves, and they were speaking loudly. She addressed the courtroom with the kind of deliberate calm that made every word feel permanent. This court has now received evidence of a systematic, multi-year effort to conceal marital assets through shell corporations, fabricated personal circumstances, and repeated perjury. David sat motionless. His expensive suit suddenly looked like a costume. Judge Owens continued, "Mr. Bennett, you took an oath before this court. Multiple times. Each time, you stated that your disclosures were complete. Each time, the evidence now shows they were not." Mark Reynolds stood. "Your Honor, my client." The judge held up her hand. "Mr. Reynolds, your client has had ample opportunity to be forthcoming. He chose not to be. I am no longer interested in hearing what he intended. I am interested in what he did." Mark sat down slowly. He had been in practice for 22 years. He had never seen a case disintegrate this completely, this publicly. Judge Owens turned to David directly. You presented yourself to this court as a transparent, honest party seeking fair division. The reality is that you spent 3 years building a financial architecture designed to defraud your wife. You enlisted your mistress as a corporate officer. You fabricated a pregnancy. You attempted to weaponize your wife's hospitalization. And when she noticed one single detail that did not align, you attacked her reputation, her attorney, and her housing. The courtroom was absolutely silent. David stood. His voice cracked. Your Honor, I was protecting my business. You were protecting yourself, the judge said. At the expense of a pregnant woman, you swore before God and the law to honor. Laura felt tears building behind her eyes, not from vindication, from exhaustion, from the accumulated weight of months of fighting, and finally hearing someone in authority say what she had known all along. Judge Owens addressed the psychiatrist's evaluation next, regarding the behavioral assessment submitted by Dr. Harold Finch. This court notes that the evaluation was conducted without direct examination of the subject. This is a fundamental violation of professional ethics. The assessment is stricken from the record. Furthermore, Dr. Finch is referred to the State Medical Board for review. She paused. Mrs. Bennett is not delusional. She is observant. There is a significant difference. Laura pressed her hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. The judge continued. This court is also referring the matter of Mr. Bennett's acquisition of the residential property at the address where Mrs. Bennett was residing for investigation into potential witness intimidation. David's face drained of color. Judge Owens moved through the remaining findings with surgical precision. She addressed Megan Hale's role, noting that Ms. Hale had been referred for investigation as a co-conspirator in asset concealment. She addressed the fabricated pregnancy claim, calling it one of the most troubling elements she had encountered in her career on the bench. She then looked at Gloria Bennett, who sat in the back row, rigid and pale. Mrs. Bennett Sr., this court is aware of a publicly circulated video in which you made defamatory statements about the petitioner. While that matter is outside my jurisdiction, I note it for the record as part of a broader pattern of intimidation. Gloria stood and left the courtroom without a word. She walked slowly, carefully, like someone navigating unfamiliar ground. For the first time in Laura's memory, Gloria looked old. Judge Owens turned to Laura. Mrs. Bennett, you came to this court at a disadvantage. You were outfunded, outrepresented, and systematically undermined. You were told you did not understand business. You were told your contributions did not matter. You were called delusional for noticing what everyone else missed. Laura met the judge's eyes. This court sees you, Judge Owens said, and this court believes you. Laura covered her mouth with her hand. Rachel, sitting in the gallery, pressed both fists against her eyes and cried without making a sound. Judge Owens prepared to deliver the ruling. She organized her papers, adjusted her glasses, and spoke. In the matter of Bennett versus Bennett, this court finds clear and convincing evidence of deliberate asset concealment, perjury, and fraud upon the court. The ruling was comprehensive. First, all previously concealed assets, including those held in shell corporations, trusts, and offshore accounts, totaling an estimated $4.2 million, are awarded to Laura Bennett in their entirety. Second, David Bennett is ordered to pay full spousal support and child support, calculated on his actual total income, including all hidden entities, for a period to be determined by this court. Third, David Bennett is referred to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution on charges of perjury and fraud. Fourth, the fabricated pregnancy claim is entered into the record as evidence of deliberate deception and is referred for further investigation. Fifth, Megan Hale is referred for investigation as a co-conspirator in asset concealment and fraud. Sixth, Dr. Harold Finch is referred to the State Medical Board for conducting a professional evaluation without direct examination of the subject. Judge Owens set down her papers. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "you walked into this courtroom believing you had already won. You had the money, the lawyers, the documentation. What you did not have was the truth. And the truth, Mr. Bennett, does not need a three-piece suit to be heard." She struck the gavel. "This matter is concluded. All orders will be enforced as written." The sound of the gavel echoed once, and then the room erupted into murmurs. Laura sat perfectly still, tears running down her face. Sophie gripped her hand. Rachel was already pushing through the gallery to reach her. David Bennett remained seated. He did not stand. He did not speak to Mark Reynolds, who was already packing his briefcase in silence. He stared at the table in front of him, at the wood grain, at the scratches left by years of cases that had come and gone. For the first time in his life, David Bennett had nothing to say. 6 months later, Laura Bennett stood in the nursery of her new home, watching morning sunlight move across the walls. The room was painted soft yellow. The curtains were white. A mobile of paper butterflies hung above the crib, turning slowly in the breeze from the open window. Her daughter, Emma, was 3 months old. She slept the way babies sleep, totally, completely, as if the world were a safe and simple place. Her tiny fist curled around the edge of her blanket. Her breathing was so quiet that Laura sometimes held her own breath just to listen. Laura had bought the house with her settlement. It was modest by most standards. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a kitchen with windows that faced east, so the morning light came in golden and warm. It was the first home that was entirely hers. She had chosen the paint colors, the furniture, the curtains. She had planted a garden in the backyard, not because she had to, because she wanted to. There is a particular kind of peace that comes after a long struggle. It is not dramatic. It does not feel like victory. It feels like putting down something heavy and realizing how tired your arms have been. That was what Laura felt most mornings now. Not celebration, relief. The doorbell rang at 10. Rachel Torres stood on the porch holding a gift bag, a bottle of wine, and a grin that could light up a room. She walked in without waiting for an invitation, the way she always had. "Where's my goddaughter?" she said, heading straight for the nursery. "Sleeping," Laura said. Rachel peered into the crib. "She is perfect. She looks like you, which means she got lucky." Laura laughed, a real laugh, full and unguarded. Rachel pulled something from the gift bag. It was a tiny onesie, white with black text. The text read, "My mom noticed the details." Laura stared at it. Then she laughed until she cried, and then she cried until she laughed again. And Rachel held her through all of it, because that was what Rachel had always done. They sat in the kitchen together. Rachel poured the wine. Laura took a sip and set it down. It was the first glass of wine she had allowed herself in over a year. "So," Rachel said, "I have news." Laura raised an eyebrow. "I am leaving Mercy General." Laura sat up. "What? Why?" Rachel shrugged. "Because a very fancy hospital in Chicago offered me a head nurse position. And because," Rachel paused, "I think I have been holding on to this city because I was holding on to you. And you do not need holding anymore." Laura reached across the table and squeezed Rachel's hand. "I will always need you." Rachel squeezed back. "Yeah, you will. But now you need me from a healthy distance where I can spoil your child with inappropriate gifts and visit on holidays. That is the dream, Laura. That is the actual dream." They talked for 2 hours, about everything and nothing, about the future, about the past, about the strange, winding path that had led them from a college dormitory to a courtroom and beyond. Before Rachel left, she stopped at the door and turned back. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "That one piece of paper, that one timestamp. You almost did not bring it." Laura nodded. "I know. You almost stayed quiet." "I know." Rachel looked at her. "But you did not. And that is why we are standing here." Laura watched her drive away and stood in the doorway for a while, feeling the afternoon air, hearing the neighborhood sounds, existing in a moment that belonged entirely to her. She had started her own business 3 months ago, a consulting firm that helped women organize and understand financial documentation during divorce proceedings. She hired forensic accountants, document specialists, and paralegals who knew how to find the details that got buried in footnotes and subfilings. She called it One Detail. The firm was small: 2 employees, a shared office space, a website Rachel had helped her build, but the calls were already coming in. Women who sounded the way Laura had sounded a year ago, tired, scared, told they did not understand. Laura listened to each one the way she wished someone had listened to her, and then she showed them how to look. Sophie Carter's career had transformed. The Bennett case had drawn attention. Other attorneys called. Clients sought her out. She now specialized in high-asset divorce cases, and she had a reputation for finding what other lawyers missed. She kept a framed copy of the original system log on her office wall. When new clients asked about it, she told them the same thing every time. That is a reminder that one detail can change everything, and that the people who notice details are the ones you want on your side. David Bennett's real estate empire did not survive the investigation. Multiple partners dissolved their contracts within weeks of the ruling. Banks flagged his accounts. 2 ongoing development projects were frozen pending review. The shell companies Clean had identified were dismantled one by one. David pleaded no contest to fraud charges. His attorney negotiated the terms. He received 2 years of supervised probation, a substantial fine, and a restitution order that would follow him for years. He sold the penthouse and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city. He had supervised visitation with Emma twice a month. He showed up on time. He held his daughter carefully, like someone learning how to be gentle for the first time. Laura watched from the doorway the first few visits. Then she stopped watching. She did not need to. Megan Hale took a plea deal. She cooperated with investigators and testified against David in exchange for reduced charges. The glamour that had once defined her had been replaced by something quieter, something chastened. She and David had not spoken since the day she walked out of the courtroom. Laura did not know where Megan was now and did not care to find out. Gloria Bennett sent Laura a letter 6 weeks after the final ruling. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope with no return address. Laura almost threw it away. Instead, she opened it. The letter contained 2 words. "I am sorry." Laura read it, folded it, put it in a drawer. She had not responded. Maybe she would someday. Maybe she would not. That was her choice now. Everything was her choice now. On a quiet evening in October, Laura put Emma down for her nap, turned off the nursery light, and walked to the kitchen. She sat at the table, the same posture she had held in that courtroom nearly a year ago. Hands folded, back straight, eyes forward. But everything was different now. She was not looking down. She was not bracing herself. She was not waiting for someone to decide her future. She was looking out the window at the garden she had planted, at the sky turning pink and gold, at the world moving forward the way it always did, indifferent and beautiful and full of possibilities she was only beginning to explore. If you are listening to this right now, and something about Laura's story feels familiar, If you have ever been told you do not understand, if you have ever been dismissed as emotional or hysterical or too simple to see the truth, if you have ever sat in a room where your voice felt smaller than everyone else's, then hear this. Your voice matters, even when it shakes, especially when it shakes. You do not need to be the loudest person in the room. You do not need the most expensive lawyer or the most powerful connections. You do not need anyone's permission to notice what is right in front of you. Sometimes the truth does not arrive with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it arrives as a detail, a timestamp, a date that does not align, a number that does not add up, a feeling in your gut that something is wrong, even when everyone around you insists it is fine. Trust that feeling. Follow that detail. Speak up, even quietly, because sometimes one detail is all it takes. David Bennett walked into that courtroom believing he had already won. He had the money, he had the lawyers, he had the confidence of a man who had spent years controlling every variable. But he could not control the truth, and the truth did not need his permission to be heard. It just needed someone brave enough to notice it. Closing credit. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real lessons. Every detail was crafted with purpose because we believe great storytelling can inspire, empower, and remind you that the truth always finds its way to the surface. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. We will see you in the next one.